The night it all started, I wasn't even supposed to be home. That's the part that eats at me the most. If my poker night hadn't fallen through, if Mike hadn't caught the flu, if I had just stayed out an hour longer, maybe I wouldn't have seen it. Maybe I would have stayed blind a little longer. But fate or karma, or whatever cruel force runs this universe, had other plans for me. I walked through the front door expecting silence. Emily had told me she'd be out with her friend Olivia for drinks. Instead, the house wasn't just empty, it felt wrong. Like the air had weight, like someone had been here just moments ago and left a piece of themselves behind. I stood in the darkened living room, the glow of the street lamp outside cutting strange shadows through the blinds, and listened. A sound, the softest creak from upstairs. Not the pipes, not the wind, something heavier. Someone. My body moved before my mind caught up. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart slamming against my ribs. The hallway stretched in front of me, dim, familiar, but suddenly foreign. Our bedroom door was half open. A crack of light bled into the hallway. And then, like a horror movie in slow motion, I saw it. The closet. The damn closet. The door wasn't fully closed. And from inside, breathing. Not deep, not relaxed. Someone was holding their breath. Everything inside me turned to ice. I stepped forward, reaching out, fingers brushing the handle. Then, a voice behind me, Emily's voice. "What are you doing?" I turned. She stood there in the hallway, still in her club outfit, black dress, hair messier than usual, a sheen of sweat on her forehead like she'd run home. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and her hand gripped her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I didn't answer. I just stared at her. Then, slow, deliberate, I reached for the closet door and yanked it open. He stood there. Some guy I had never seen before. Tall, shirtless, breathing fast like a hunted animal. His jeans were undone, belt hanging loose, as if he hadn't had time to fix himself. Emily let out this choked sound, something between a gasp and a curse. And me? I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just looked at him, at her, at the bed. Our bed. The sheets weren't even straight anymore. Emily moved first. She stepped forward, reaching for me like she thought she could smooth this over, like she could find the right words and make it all disappear. "Listen, it's not what it looks like." The words were so laughable, so absolutely mind-numbingly idiotic, that for a second I genuinely thought I might burst out laughing. Instead, I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. "Not what it looks like?" My voice came out weirdly calm. Too calm. The guy in the closet flinched. Emily swallowed hard. "I can explain." I tilted my head, staring at her, at him, then back at her. "Go on, then." She hesitated. 1 second. 2. And in those 2 seconds, I saw the panic in her eyes. Not regret. Not guilt. Just the fear of getting caught. I turned back to the guy. "What's your name?" He hesitated. Josh." "Josh," I repeated. "Did you know she was married?" Josh glanced at Emily. She shook her head fast, but it was too late. His face gave him away. I clenched my jaw, took a slow breath, and let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel it, to drown in it. Then, finally, I turned back to Emily. "So," I said, voice still eerily even, "Olivia, huh?" Emily's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She had no words, no excuse that could patch up the gaping hole she had just torn into our marriage. The moment stretched, thick and suffocating. The only sound in the room was Josh's uneven breathing. He was still standing in my closet like some pathetic horror movie extra, frozen in place, waiting for his cue to escape. I took a slow step forward, watching as Emily instinctively shrank back. That told me everything I needed to know. She knew she was caught, knew there was no way to manipulate her way out of this one. But that didn't mean she wouldn't try. "Listen, just let me explain," she said, voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like." I cut her off, voice dangerously calm. "Yeah, you already said that. Try again." Her eyes darted toward Josh, and I saw it. The quick, almost imperceptible shake of her head. A warning, a desperate, silent plea. "Don't say anything." Josh, to his credit, looked just as panicked as she did. His mouth twitched like he wanted to speak, but he was clearly waiting for permission. I turned to him, forcing out a breath through my nose. Josh, right? He swallowed hard. Yeah. You got about 5 seconds to get the F*** out of my house before I stop being nice. He didn't hesitate. He nearly tripped over himself scrambling out of the closet, yanking his shoes from the corner. His belt was still undone as he bolted past me, not even daring to look back at Emily. She didn't stop him, didn't even call his name, just watched in silence as the front door slammed shut behind him. Then it was just us. Emily rubbed her arms like she was cold, her whole body trembling. I never meant for you to find out like this. That set something off in me. Not an apology. Not even a pathetic attempt at remorse. Just that. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. That's what you're going with? She blinked, lips parting slightly like she couldn't figure out what to say. How long? I asked. Emily hesitated. That was enough of an answer. How long? My voice was sharp now, cutting through the thick, disgusting tension in the air. She dropped her gaze to the floor. A few months. I clenched my fists so hard my nails bit into my palms. My whole body felt like it had been set on fire. Our home, our marriage, our life. It had all been a joke for months, and I was the punchline. I nodded slowly, trying to process, to breathe, to not do something I'd regret. And Olivia? Emily's head snapped up. What? I let out another cold, humorless laugh. You told me you were with Olivia tonight. She flinched. Was Olivia even there? She bit her lip, shook her head. And that was it. That was the moment something inside me just broke. I turned, walked out of the bedroom, down the stairs. Emily chased after me, her bare feet slapping against the floor. Wait, where are you going? I grabbed my keys from the counter. Out. She reached for my arm. Can we talk about this? I yanked away so fast she stumbled. You don't get to ask for that. Not anymore. She stared at me, eyes wide, hands shaking. For a split second, I thought I saw something real there. Maybe regret. Maybe just fear of what came next. But it didn't matter anymore. I walked out without looking back. The house felt different in the early morning light. Quieter, colder, like it already knew I was leaving before I even did. Emily was still passed out in bed, tangled in the sheets she had ruined with another man. Her makeup was smudged, her hair a mess, peaceful, like she hadn't just shattered everything we built. Like my life wasn't lying in pieces around me while she snored softly, blissfully unaware that she had finally pushed me too far. I stood in the doorway for a second, just looking at her. Not with love, not with anger, just nothing. I thought about waking her up, thought about saying something, anything, a final speech, a last word to haunt her the way she had gutted me. But what was the point? She didn't care. She never had. And I wasn't about to waste one more breath on her. Instead, I turned and walked out. No notes, no goodbyes. My car was already packed. I had grabbed the essentials, clothes, laptop, my wallet, the few things I actually cared about. Everything else? She could keep it. Let her rot in it. I slid into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel for a second, just breathing. Then, without looking back, I started the car and pulled away from the house that was no longer my home. By the time the sun had fully risen, I was gone. An hour later, my phone started blowing up. First, I ignored it, let it vibrate in the passenger seat while the highway stretched out in front of me. But curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up at a red light and glanced at the notifications. Emily, 14 missed calls. Emily, 5 new messages. I opened them. Where are you? Seriously, this isn't funny. Did you just leave? Are you serious right now? Get back here. We need to talk. I stared at the last message, laughed under my breath. Talk? Now she wanted to talk? I typed out a response. One single word. No. And then I blocked her number. I didn't have a plan. Didn't know where I was going. All I knew was that I needed to get as far away from her as possible. But fate wasn't done with me yet, because 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. An unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But something in my gut told me to answer. So I did. And the voice on the other end? It changed everything. I pressed the phone to my ear, still gripping the wheel with one hand. Yeah. There was silence for a second. Then, a voice I didn't recognize. Male. Hesitant. Hey, is this my name? Instantly, my brain went into overdrive. The tone. The hesitation. The fact that it was a number I didn't recognize. My gut twisted. Who's this? I asked, already on edge. A breath on the other end. Then, my name's Daniel. I think we need to talk about Emily. I almost swerved off the damn road. My heartbeat slammed into my ribs. Who the hell was Daniel? I forced myself to stay calm. What about her? Another pause. Then, in a lower voice, like he was afraid of being overheard. I think she's been lying to both of us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I pulled onto the shoulder, my hands shaking as I put the car in park. You're gonna have to be a lot more specific than that, I said tightly. Daniel exhaled. Look, man, I don't want to do this over the phone. Can we meet? Everything in me screamed no. What if this was some setup? Some trick? But then again, what did I have to lose? I clenched my jaw. Where? There was another pause. Then he gave me an address. A coffee shop. Half an hour away. I'll be there, I said and hung up. I sat there for a second, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. My mind was racing, trying to piece together what the hell was happening. Emily had already torn my life apart once. And now, something told me this was about to get a whole lot worse. 30 minutes later, I walked into the coffee shop, heart hammering. I scanned the place and then I saw him. A guy about my age. Dark hair. Nervous. He looked up as I approached, recognition flashing in his eyes. I sat down across from him. Start talking. Daniel hesitated, looking down at his coffee cup like he wished it was something stronger. Then finally he spoke. I've been seeing Emily. The words hit like a bullet. I clenched my fists under the table. No kidding. But he shook his head. No, you don't understand. I've been seeing her for almost a year. And the whole time, she told me she was single. The air left my lungs. A year. She never told me she was married. Daniel continued, his voice low. I only found out last night, when I saw your wedding photo on her nightstand. My mouth went dry. Wait, last night? Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah. Then he hesitated. She wasn't with me. She told me she was going out with a friend. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper. Then who the hell was the guy in my closet? Daniel's face paled. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. And that's when I realized, Emily wasn't just cheating on me. She was cheating on him too. And worse, there was a third guy. Hello? My voice came out rough like I hadn't used it in hours. For a second, silence. Then, a man's voice, low, hesitant. Hey, is this Emily's husband? Something in the way he said it sent a ripple of unease down my spine. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. Ex-husband, I wanted to say, but I bit it back. Who is this? The guy hesitated. I could hear traffic in the background, the distant hum of a city waking up. My name's Brandon, he finally said. Listen, man, I don't know how to say this, but I think we need to talk. About Emily. The way he said her name, flat, like she wasn't someone he cared about, told me everything. I pulled onto the shoulder, my heart hammering. You've got about 5 seconds before I hang up. Brandon exhaled sharply. She's been lying to both of us. That got my attention. I stayed silent, waiting. He paused, like he was trying to figure out how much to tell me. I've been seeing her for about 6 months. The world around me dimmed. 6 months. I didn't speak. Couldn't. She told me she was single, he continued. Divorced, actually. Said her ex was some psycho who kept stalking her. She showed me messages. Said you wouldn't leave her alone. He let out a hollow laugh. Guess that was a lie. I was gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. She told him I was a stalker. I forced myself to speak. How'd you find out? Brandon hesitated again. Then, because she did the same thing to me. The words hit like a punch to the ribs. She was seeing someone else the entire time, he said, voice tight. Found out last night. Walked in on them at her place. a humorless laugh. Guess I know what that feels like now. I stared out at the empty stretch of road ahead of me, pulse roaring in my ears. I should have felt validated. Like, hey, at least I wasn't the only idiot she fooled. But all I felt was a sick, hollow rage. She's been playing us both, Brandon said, his voice sharper now. And probably more guys, too. I wouldn't be surprised. I closed my eyes. Why are you telling me this? Brandon was quiet for a second. Then, with a bitter edge, because I think she's about to do something really, really stupid. My breath caught. What do you mean? He sighed. She texted me after I caught her. Said she was gonna fix everything. I don't know what the hell that means, but I thought you should know. A chill crawled down my spine. Then, before I could ask anything else, my phone buzzed with a new notification. Emily, voicemail, one new message. Brandon must have heard the vibration. That her? Yeah. Listen to it. I put him on speaker and pressed play. Emily's voice came through, breathy, slurred, like she'd been crying. Or drinking. I can't do this anymore, she whispered. I screwed up, I know I did. But, I love you. I love you and I can't. A shaky inhale. I need you to come home, please, before it's too late. A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper. I don't want to be here without you. The message ended. Silence filled the car. Then Brandon spoke, low and serious. Man, I think she's about to do something real bad. I was already shifting into drive. Yeah, I muttered. I think so too. And then I floored it. I tore down the highway, my mind racing faster than the speedometer. The sun had fully risen now, casting sharp beams of light across the road, but everything felt dim, unreal, like I was watching myself from outside my own body. Emily's voicemail kept looping in my head. I don't want to be here without you. I didn't know if it was a desperate manipulation tactic or something more real, something darker. And as much as I wanted to believe she was just being dramatic, there was something in her voice, something raw. Brandon was still on the line. How far are you? 15 minutes. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Where does she live? A hesitation. You don't know. I clenched my jaw. We lived together. She moved out. She never told me where. Brandon let out a breath. Jesus. All right, I'll send you the address. I'll meet you there. The text came through seconds later. I didn't respond, just pressed harder on the gas. 12 minutes. My mind kept twisting around itself. What was I even walking into? Was she waiting for me with some new lie? Would she be standing in the doorway with that same smug look she had last night, telling me I was the crazy one? Or was this something worse? Was I about to find her unconscious on the floor? The thought made my stomach turn. 9 minutes. I switched lanes aggressively, nearly clipping a truck. My hands were sweating, my pulse hammering. Why did I even care? After everything, why did I still care? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that if she was serious, if she actually hurt herself, I'd have to carry that for the rest of my life. No matter how much I hated her, I wasn't ready for that. 5 minutes. I sped through a yellow light, ignoring the angry honk from the car behind me. My heart was in my throat now. 3 minutes. Brandon called again. I'm here, he said. Her car's in the driveway, but she's not answering the door. My foot pressed harder on the gas. Did you check the windows? Blinds are shut. No lights on. A pause. This doesn't feel right, man. Neither did last night. I turned onto her street, tires screeching as I pulled up next to the curb. Brandon was already on the porch, pounding on the door. Emily, he yelled. Open up. I was out of the car before the engine even shut off. My stomach knotted at the sight of her front door. What was I about to walk into? I rang the doorbell, knocked, waited. Nothing. Brandon shot me a look, then moved to one of the side windows, pressing his face to the glass. I can't see anything, he muttered. My patience snapped. I turned the knob. Locked. Without thinking, I stepped back and kicked the door in. The frame splintered, the lock giving way instantly. The door slammed open, revealing the dark, silent interior of Emily's house. A blast of cold air hit me, like the AC had been running full blast for hours. The living room was eerily still. Brandon and I exchanged a glance. Then, without a word, we stepped inside. Something felt off. I could smell it before I could see it. A sickly sweet scent, mixed with something else. Something metallic. Then I saw it. A single, dark smear on the hardwood floor, leading down the hall, toward the bedroom. Brandon swore under his breath. I swallowed hard, my pulse a deafening roar in my ears. Then, slowly, I followed the trail. I stepped forward, my breath shallow, my heartbeat a hammer against my ribs. Each footstep felt heavy, the floor creaking beneath me like it was warning me to turn back. But I couldn't. The smear on the floor wasn't just a stain. It was dragged. Not a splatter, not a single drop. Something or someone had moved through it. Brandon was right behind me, his breathing just as sharp as mine. "Man, I don't like this," he muttered. Neither did I. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel, the bedroom door slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and there she was, Emily, lying on the bed, perfectly still. For a moment, I thought she was dead. The sheets were tangled around her legs, her arm draped over her stomach. A bottle of pills sat tipped over on the nightstand. Some of the capsules spilled onto the floor. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat next to it. And on the mirror across from the bed, a message. "I'm sorry." The words were scrawled in something dark. Lipstick? Blood? Couldn't tell. My chest tightened. My hands curled into fists. "Emily?" I said, my voice rough. No response. I moved closer, hovering over her. She was breathing, shallow but steady. I exhaled, the tension in my chest loosening just enough for me to think. "She's alive," I muttered. Brandon let out a breath behind me. "Jesus." I turned to him. "Call 911. He didn't hesitate. While he dialed, I grabbed Emily's wrist. Her skin was cold, but her pulse was there, weak, but present. I shook her gently. "Emily." "Nothing." I shook harder. "Emily, wake up." Her eyelids fluttered. She let out a small, slurred noise, her lips barely parting. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't an accident. The spilled pills, the whiskey, the message on the mirror. She wanted me to see this. She planned for me to find her like this. And for the second time in 24 hours, I didn't know whether to feel sick or furious. The front door burst open behind me, footsteps rushing in. Paramedics. Voices filled the room, quick, professional, efficient. I stepped back, letting them work. Brandon stood next to me, rubbing a hand down his face. "You think she really meant to?" "No." My voice came out sharper than I expected. Brandon glanced at me. "You sure?" I looked at Emily, her pale face, her barely conscious form. Yes, she meant for this to happen. But not to end it. To control it. To control me. She wasn't trying to die. She was trying to make sure I never left. And that made me angrier than anything else. The paramedics moved quickly, lifting Emily onto a stretcher, checking her vitals, speaking in clipped, professional tones. One of them, a woman with sharp eyes, turned to me. "Do you know what she took?" I gestured toward the nightstand. "Pills and whiskey. I don't know how many." She nodded, calling something into her radio. I barely heard it. I was still staring at Emily's pale face, the way her head lolled slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Brandon shifted beside me. "We going to the hospital?" I almost laughed. "We?" Like we were some kind of team. Like we weren't just two idiots who got played by the same woman. But what was I supposed to do? Walk away? Let her wake up in a hospital bed? Alone? Knowing that's exactly what she wanted to avoid? I clenched my jaw. "Yeah." Brandon exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "All right, I'll drive." I hesitated. Did I really want to get in a car with this guy? But the alternative was driving alone, and right now I wasn't sure that was a good idea. My hands were still shaking. "Fine," I muttered. We followed the ambulance in silence, the city passing in a blur outside the windows. I wasn't seeing any of it. All I could see was that damn message on the mirror. "I'm sorry." Sorry for what? Getting caught? Playing both of us? Or for not being able to manipulate me the way she wanted? I didn't have an answer. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee. We sat in the waiting room, both of us tense, both pretending we weren't in this together. Brandon broke the silence first. "You think she actually wanted to die?" I didn't look at him. No. He ran a hand through his hair. Yeah, me neither. We sat there, staring at the ugly linoleum floor. Then he said, "You ever think about what would have happened if neither of us showed up?" I finally turned to him. "What do you mean?" He exhaled. "We both came because we got scared. Because we thought she might actually do it. But what if we didn't? What if we both said, 'Screw her,' and ignored the messages?" I frowned. "She would have called someone else." Brandon shook his head. "Would she?" That thought sank into me like a hook. Would she? Or would she have let it go too far? The idea made my skin crawl. Before I could answer, a nurse walked up. "She's stable," she said. "You can see her now." Brandon and I exchanged a glance. Neither of us moved. Then slowly I stood up. "Yeah," I muttered. "All right." And I walked toward the room, preparing to face the woman who had burned my entire life to the ground. The hospital hallway stretched ahead of me, cold and sterile, buzzing with the hum of fluorescent lights. Each step felt heavier than the last. My mind was a battlefield. Anger, exhaustion, and something else I refused to name. I stopped outside Emily's room. Through the small window in the door, I could see her lying in the hospital bed, hooked up to N4. She looked fragile, almost innocent. If I didn't know better, I might have felt sorry for her. But I did know better. Taking a slow breath, I pushed the door open. The soft beep of monitors filled the silence as I stepped inside. Emily's eyes fluttered open at the sound, her gaze unfocused at first. Then, when she saw me, something shifted. Relief, triumph, satisfaction. She had won. I didn't sit down, didn't move closer, just stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. "You called me," I said flatly. She licked her lips, her voice hoarse. "You came." I ignored that. "How much did you take?" She exhaled shakily, shifting against the pillows. "I don't know." "Enough." I narrowed my eyes. "Enough for what, Emily?" She didn't answer, just looked at me, studying my face like she was searching for a crack, a weakness. "Are you staying?" she finally whispered. There it was, the real question. She didn't care about what she had done. Not really. She cared about whether or not it worked. If I was still hers. I let the silence stretch between us, watching as her expression changed. Hope flickering, twisting into something more desperate. Then I shook my head. "No, Emily," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm not." Her lips parted slightly. "But," I cut her off. "You did this to make me come back. To make sure I wouldn't leave you." I let my words settle before delivering the final blow. "But I already left." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Real? Fake?" I didn't care. "I love you," she whispered. I let out a slow, humorless breath. "No, you don't." She flinched. "If you did, you wouldn't have lied," I continued. "You wouldn't have cheated. And you sure as hell wouldn't have pulled this." I gestured vaguely around the hospital room. "You don't love me, Emily. You just don't want to lose control." Her breath hitched, and I could see the panic creeping into her expression. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "You're just angry. You'll see. We can fix this." I tilted my head slightly. "Would you forgive me if I did what you did?" Silence. That told me everything. I nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." Her fingers gripped the blanket tightly, knuckles going white. "Please." I stepped back. "This was the last time you'll ever see me, Emily," I said, my voice steady. "Goodbye." And then, without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out the door. The hospital doors slid shut behind me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. The air outside was cool, crisp, real. Nothing like the suffocating weight of that hospital room, where Emily's fake apologies and crocodile tears had tried to pull me under one last time. Brandon was still outside, leaning against his car, arms crossed. He looked up as I approached. "Well, it's over," I said simply. He let out a slow breath. Yeah. He studied me for a second, then nodded. "Good." Neither of us spoke for a while. We weren't friends. We weren't allies. We were just two guys who had been caught in the same storm, and now the storm had passed. Eventually, Brandon ran a hand through his hair. "Guess this is it, then." "Guess so." He opened his car door, hesitated, then glanced back at me. Hey, I raised an eyebrow. If she ever tries to drag you back in, he paused. Don't let her. I let out a small, humorless chuckle. Not a chance. With a final nod, he got in his car and drove off. I stood there for a moment, watching the city wake up around me. The hum of traffic, the distant sounds of people moving on with their lives, felt foreign, like I had been trapped in some alternate reality for months and was only now stepping back into the real world. And in a way, I reached into my pocket, pulling out my phone. There was one last thing I needed to do. Emily? Blocked. I exhaled. Then I walked to my car, started the engine, and drove. No plan, no destination, just the open road ahead of me and the weight of my past finally gone. And for the first time in years, I felt free.